Hello and welcome to this presentation on basics of fundamental analysis. In this presentation, I will be covering some of the very basics in fundamental analysis. So let's see what fundamental analysis is. Fundamental analysis is a method of evaluating the intrinsic value, or in other words, the underlying value of a particular stock. There are two types of fundamental valuation techniques. One is absolute valuation and the other is relative valuation. What absolute valuation does is, it takes the company's forecasted future cash flows into consideration and adjusts them or discount them into present value terms. This will give the most accurate valuation for a company. On the other hand, relative valuation will involve calculating certain ratios and comparing these ratios against either historical data or that of peers or industry data. Those ratios could be trailing if historical data is used or forward when forecasted data is used. But due to the complexity involved, we will not be covering absolute valuation technique in this presentation. Instead, we will look at some of the relative valuation techniques. So following are the ratios that we will be looking at in this presentation: earnings per share, price earning ratio, net asset per share, price to book value, dividend yield, return on equity. Some of these ratios, like the price earning ratio, will be concentrating on company's profitability, while ratios like NAV and PBV will be looking at the company's asset base. So let's move on to the first ratio. Earnings per share shows how much profits a company make for each share it has issued. In order to calculate this ratio, we will take the total profits earned or the net income of a company minus the preference dividends, if any, and divide that by the total number of shares in issues. It will give the earnings earned for each share. Now let's look at an example. This is a comparison between two companies in the same industry. You will notice that company A earns more profits than company B. From the outset, you will feel that company A is more attractive than company B. But which share earns more profits on a per share basis? So when you divide the profits with the number of shares in issue, you will notice that company B earns more profits on a per share basis than company A. Therefore, an investor is likely to pay a higher price for a company which has a higher EPS compared to a company with a lower EPS. This table shows the earnings per share of some of the more prominent companies. The highest is at the top and the lowest is at the bottom. However, since we do not consider the market price when calculating the EPS, it will not give an indication whether a share is expensive or not in relation to its market price. That is why we calculate the price earning ratio. The price earning ratio, or the PE ratio, will tell us how many times the market is willing to pay for each rupee a company earns. We calculate this ratio by dividing the market price of a share from its earnings per share. Now let's look at the same example we looked at previously. As you know, company B has a higher EPS compared to company A. So naturally, company B is trading at a higher price. But what is the PE ratio of the two companies? You will see the investors are paying only 4 times for each rupee the company A earns, whereas they have to pay 7 times for the earnings of company B. So as an investor, what seems more cheaper to you? Even though it has a lower EPS, clearly investors can pay a lesser multiple for company A when compared with company B. So more often than not, a higher PE could mean it's overvalued. But there could be instances, especially when a company is experiencing high growth, it could trade at a higher PE multiple due to high investor confidence in that company. On the other hand, a lower PE could mean it's undervalued. But there could be instances, especially when a company's financial performance is deteriorating, it could trade at a lower PE multiple due to lack of investor confidence in that company. A PE ratio could also indicate the payback period of an investment. For an example, in the case of company A, assuming the earnings will not grow or decline, in 4 years, the investor will be able to cover his investment from its earnings. To determine whether a company is overvalued or undervalued, PE ratio should not be looked at in isolation, but rather has to be compared against a benchmark PE ratio. The benchmark PE ratio can be derived as an average PE of the same company for the past years, or a PE ratio for the industry, or a PE ratio that of peer companies in the same industry. As a general rule of thumb, if a company PE equals to the benchmark PE, it may be considered as fairly valued. If a company PE is less than the benchmark PE, it may be considered as undervalued. If a company PE is more than the benchmark PE, it may be considered as overvalued. In this table, you can see the PE ratios are sorted from the most cheapest to the expensive. Lower the PE ratio, the more attractive the company is. This chart shows the market PE ratios since 2009 up to now. A reasonable market PE could possibly be in the range of 12 to 15 times. Therefore, this gives a good indication to identify whether a market is overvalued or undervalued. As you may have noticed, currently the market PE has gone well below 10 times, making it extremely undervalued. Even when you compare the market PE of the CSE against the PE ratios of MSCI frontier markets, emerging markets, or against developed markets, ours looks the most cheapest in terms of PE multiples. Moving on, the next ratio is the net asset value per share, or we also call it the book value per share. Net assets is the total value of the company's assets the shareholders will theoretically receive if the company were to be liquidated. In other words, as the formula explains, it is the value you get when you deduct the total liabilities in a company from its total assets. In order to arrive at a per share figure, we need to divide the total net assets by the number of shares. Coming back to our original example of company A and company B, you will notice that company A has total assets of 100 million, while its total liabilities are 50 million. Therefore, in order to derive their net asset figure, we need to deduct their liabilities from their total assets, which gives the net assets, of 50 million. Company B has total assets of 180 million and liabilities of 152 million. Therefore, its total net assets are 28 million. When you compare the absolute net asset figures, company A has a larger net asset figure. But which company has higher net assets on a per share basis? After dividing the net assets figure by the number of shares in issue, you will see that company B offers a higher net asset figure on a per share basis, which means an investor would prefer paying a higher market price for company B compared to company A. So if a share of any good company is trading below company's NAV, it presents a great opportunity for an investor. For an example, if the NAV is 100 and the share price is 80, theoretically, if he buys the 100% of the company and liquidate it, he will end up making a profit of 20 rupees a share or a return of 25%. That is why a company is considered undervalued if its share price is trading below NAV. However, an investor should also be mindful about the asset quality. A bank will have better liquid assets compared to a company running a factory. And also a company that makes continuous losses could eat up into the net assets and eventually make the net assets become negative. This table shows the NAVs of companies from highest to lowest. However, when it comes to buying the share, that will depend on how much an investor will have to pay for it in relation to its net asset value. That is why we calculate the price to book value. It measures the market valuation of a company relative to its net asset value. The formula is divide the market price of a share by its net asset value per share. Let's look at this example. As you can see, company A's NAV is 25 rupees a share and company B's NAV is 56 rupees a share. Clearly, company B has a higher NAV, but which one is cheaper in relation to its market price? That's why you need to calculate their price to book values. You will see company A's PBV is less than 1 and company B's PBV is more than 1. What that means is company A's market price is 0.8 times of its net asset value or 20% lesser than its net asset value, while company B's market price is 1.5 times its net asset value or 50% higher than its net asset value. Clearly, company A is the cheaper one to go for. Therefore, as a general rule of thumb, if a company's PBV is equal to 1, it may be considered as fairly valued. If a company's PBV is less than 1, it may be considered as undervalued. If a company's PBV is more than 1, it may be considered as relatively expensive. This table shows the price to book values of companies being sorted from the most cheapest to the expensive. Even when you compare the CSE's price to book values against MSCI frontier markets, emerging markets, or against developed markets, CSE is the most cheapest. The next ratio is the dividend yield. The dividend is what the company pays its shareholders out of its profits. The dividend yield is the percentage returns the investor gets in relation to its share price. It is calculated by dividing the annual dividend per share from its market price and multiplied by 100. Let us look at this example. Company A pays an annual dividend of 2 rupees and currently trades at a market price of 20. Therefore, its dividend yield is 10%. Company B pays an annual dividend of 10 rupees and currently trades at a market price of 84 rupees. Therefore, its dividend yield is 11.9%. So you see, company B gives a higher dividend yield than company A at the current market prices. Something to bear in mind is Assuming the same dividend is maintained in the following year, the yield will rise if the share price falls and vice versa. This table shows counters listed from highest to lowest in terms of their dividend yield. Lowest being Lanka Lubricants, highest being the Lanka Lubricants, and the lowest being TJ Lanka. This chart shows that when you compare the CSE's dividend yield against MSCI frontier markets, emerging markets, or against developed markets, CSE is extremely attractive and second only to UK FTSE 100, giving an yield of 4.2%. We now come to the final ratio, which is the return on equity. This shows how efficiently the company's net assets or shareholders' equity is used to generate profits. It is calculated by taking company's net income and dividing it by the average shareholders' equity and multiplying by 100. The ratio should not be used in isolation. Instead, it should be compared with peer companies' ROEs to understand whether the return on equity of the company is good or bad. This table shows the ROEs from the highest to lowest. You will notice Commercial Bank is efficiently managing their net assets with a higher ROE compared to Sampath Bank. In terms of the ROE, Commercial Bank will be a better buy. Up to now, the ratios we looked at helps us to analyze a company based on its profitability and its asset base. However, a company's share price is not only determined by those factors alone. It factors in so many other external factors as well. These external factors could affect the external environment the businesses operate in. Some affects the entire market as a whole, and some affect certain businesses in isolation. So now let's take a look at some of those external factors. Interest rates. Interest rates is one of the key external factors that we have to keep an eye on, since it has a bearing on the entire market and its businesses. Therefore, understanding the relationship between interest rates and the stock market can help investors understand how changes in interest rates may affect their investments and how to make better financial decisions. So what happens when the interest rates rise? A rise in the interest rates mean the risk-free rate, or in simple terms, the fixed income returns tends to go up. Therefore, the opportunity cost of investing in the stock market increases, making stocks less attractive to investors. Also, since many investors tend to borrow and invest in the market, when the cost of borrowing increases, the holding costs of stock portfolios will go up for investors. From a listed company's point of view, when credit becomes more expensive for companies, their finance costs will go up and will negatively affect earnings, growth, and stock valuations. Therefore, you may have now realized that in an environment where interest rates are rising, the stock market will become less attractive to investors, and the opposite will happen when the interest rates are falling. This graph compares the all share price index against the T-bill rate, or in other words, the risk-free rate. The all share price index is shown with the red line, and the T-bill rate is shown with the blue line. You may notice whenever the interest rates are falling, the stock market have appreciated. And whenever the interest rates are rising, the stock markets have declined. So you can clearly understand that the interest rates and the stock markets have a negative correlation between them. The following two graphs compare the all share price index with the prime lending rate or PLR as well as with the deposit rates. Because both PLR and the deposit rates are pegged on the T-bill rates, they too are having a negative correlation with the stock market. Exchange rate. A volatile exchange rate can discourage foreign investors entering our stock market. And existing foreign investors could start to pull out funds if they anticipate the rupee to further depreciate against the dollar. That will create more selling in the market that can bring down the market prices of shares. On the other hand, when a currency depreciates, it also makes our market more attractive for foreign investors since they can buy more shares for the same amount of dollars. From a listed company's point of view, let's see what happens if the currency depreciates. For companies that import raw materials, will have to pay more rupees to buy the same amount of dollars, thus making their cost of sales to go up, leading to lesser earnings. Companies that import and distribute will see their products becoming less attractive to clients due to import costs being higher. However, for companies that export, will earn a higher rupee revenue, or can afford to undercut competitor prices to capture market share. This graph shows the USD LKR graph since 2010, and you will notice that our rupee has been continuously depreciating against the dollar. Inflation. Inflation is of three types. First one is the demand pull inflation. Demand pull inflation occurs when the overall demand for goods and services in an economy increases more rapidly than the economy's production capacity. For an example, a boost in the tourism sector could lead to more chicken consumption, making the prices of a 1 kilo of chicken to go up. Second one is the cost push inflation. It refers to the increase in the prices of production process inputs. For an example, take clinker, which is the raw material for cement. If the price of clinker goes up in the global market, the price of a cement bag could also go up due to higher production costs. Third one is called built-in inflation. This occurs due to adaptive expectations. That means due to future expectations, especially when the cost of living is on the rise. Labor expects and demands more wages to maintain their cost of living. This is very evident in the plantation sector, where we see time to time higher wages are being demanded by their labor. Governments, taxes, and laws could also affect directly the businesses which are listed in the market. Especially ad hoc tax policies could create uncertainty in the minds of investors. For an example, in 2015, there was a retrospective tax charged on the banking sector on the profits earned for 2013, where they had already paid the stipulated tax for that year. Those additional tax burdens made the share prices fall in the banking sector. On the other hand, a business-friendly tax policy that could leave more earnings for the owners could give a boost to the share prices. For an example, we saw how the market reacted. In fact, it clearly went up, welcoming the tax concessions introduced by the new president end of 2019. Industry trends. Industry trends does have long-term implications on how businesses progress. For an example, who thought we will be using phones which doesn't have any buttons on it? With the arrival of smartphones, it made the keypad phones outdated. Therefore, Nokia or BlackBerry is no longer the market leader. Every time that Apple introduces a new technology to their phones, their stock prices keep going up. This is evident in this graph as well. Look how the stock prices of Apple has grown while the growth of the company that owned BlackBerry have got stagnated. Same thing happens with the arrival of the electric car. The demand for petrol cars will be relatively less compared to what it could have been. Now most people's dream car has become the Tesla. Global trends. Global trends affect the businesses as well. As you all know, since the outbreak of the coronavirus, world markets have had a sharp decline. Furthermore, it led to the decline of the majority of the commodity prices, except for gold, which appreciated immensely. So that's the end of the external factors. Now we come to an interesting section. That is, we call it the golden rules of share trading. These are some of the disciplines that you need to strictly adhere to trade safely in the stock market. Many investors get burnt in the market simply because they don't stick to these simple guidelines. The first is to avoid the herd mentality. What is the herd mentality? As this picture shows you, if you run with the herd without knowing where they are running to, you might be heading towards a cliff. Same thing will happen if you buy or sell stocks because others do. You might end up buying a stock at an extremely high price and make a huge loss on it. Next, you need to take informed decisions. Always take time to do your own research. Avoid buying on tips which is already out there in the public domain. Prices may have already factored that information by now. Stick to businesses you understand. If you don't understand about a particular business, then at least spend some time learning about it. Know the reasons why you invested in that company. Do not let your emotions cloud your judgment. Why do you think that many investors want to buy stocks when it goes up, but does not want to when it's come down and cheap? That is because of fear and greed. But you need to use those emotions objectively. Warren Buffett once said, to be fearful when others are greedy and to be greedy when others are fearful, which means you shouldn't be scared to buy when the prices are cheap and also should not chase stocks when they have already appreciated by several multiples. Create a broad portfolio. A general rule of thumb is to not to invest more than 25% of your investments into one company. Because if a share drops by 10%, the maximum hit on your portfolio then would be just 2.5%, which is a small impact. Make sure to invest your surplus funds. You should not invest funds which you need in the short term. An accepted norm is to limit your stock market exposure to 30% of your total funds. In this era, now we are connected than ever before. Therefore, we need to keep a tab on what's happening around the world, since something that happens in other parts of the world could affect us as well. If the circumstances have changed adversely, then you should not hold back your portfolio emotionally. If the selling is the right thing to do, as at that moment, you need to sell that stock irrespective of the price you bought it so that you could avoid making a bigger loss by holding on to it further. So now we have come to the end of this presentation, and I believe If you take a note of what we discussed today, that is to look at the fundamentals of a company, understand how the external environment affects such companies, and trade with certain set of disciplines, I'm sure you could become a very successful investor in the years to come. Thank you very much.